Digital Circus shows where therapy doesn't work, but it gives us something else instead that does. And that's the whole project of the show. So when you outline, it becomes really quite clear. But let's be clear about what I mean about therapy, because I'm not just attacking everything that calls itself therapy out there, and certainly not denying the fact that many people need help to function in our world, and mental health is an obvious issue with all of the traumas that our world is full of. But we're defining therapy and the common idea of therapy as an effort to put distance between us and the traumatic thing. So in Digital Circus, the traumatic thing is Caine and his infinite cartoon digital world play of the circus, you can't get out of it. So, how do you get out of the digital circus when you can't get out of the digital circus? You don't do that by putting distance between you and Caine, and that's made apparent with the show. So increasingly, we have a lot of fiction that is injecting therapy into its fiction, and that's not what fiction is for. It's a failure if it does so, really. I can't think of a good example of that succeeding. But the main example here is The Last of Us, the difference between the show and the second video game. In the second season of the show, it failed specifically because it injected therapy into its story. In the game, we have this huge burden of revenge and violence, and we are stuck in this violent cycle. But the only way we get out of that is by seeing it through to its full conclusion, where we enter into the position of our enemy figure and don't just hold them up as this out there thing that we are propped up against and fighting and have to destroy, but we enter into the position of the enemy figure and come back to ourselves changed. So it decathects us from this enemy that we have to destroy, and that is what breaks the vicious cycle of the Hatfield-McCoy, what do I do with my mortal enemy kind of a thing. In the show, they injected therapy into the position of Ellie in particular. They also added an actual therapist, assuming that the zombie apocalypse needs therapists to deal with our trauma, instead of, again, seeing our position through. The video game is far more therapeutic in the sense of changing who we are, radically. It's a problem. So it had Ellie, with her burden of violence, constantly avoiding it as a girl who's off having fun, or when she does talk about it, it's this, but I know I shouldn't be doing this kind of a thing. It's completely wrong to take that position. It's a complete fake to have that stance towards the revenge that you must see through, right? That has to be not just the protagonist, but ours as well. And then we're seeing the dark implications of that. That's what's radical about the game. And just, for the record, the new material of the show understood that. So there's this weird mismatch where the showrunners completely don't understand what's at work in the game, and yet they do. They're able to talk about it outside of the position of Ellie, but then they ruin the position of Ellie entirely. So when we're dealing with trauma, it's absolutely not a matter of knowledge and understanding that the traumatic thing is not so scary. In The Last of Us 2, in the show, they ruined it by having Abby give her speech of motivation about why she's doing the terrible thing, and then we submit to it because she has motivation. Like, it's a completely false stance. It leads to nothing. It's garbage. In the game, if you watch what happens with that, it's dark. We fully reject it as it's happening, and Abby commits the act not with this "I've got to give my speech" nonsense, but she knows it's a dark, terrible thing that she's doing too. It happens as like a dark underbelly. In Digital Circus, we are getting to this traumatic thing by trying to find ways to wrestle with it from our own position. We can't just escape Caine and his circus by finding the exit. So that's what the pilot episode gives us. Like, the first thing is find the exit, get out, and that's basically the stance of get distance between you and the traumatic thing. So we're given the exit, and it leads nowhere. And that's a deeply Hegelian point. Kant is this idea of we have to focus on what we can understand, and there's an out there thing. But with Hegel, we understand that this idea of an out there thing is something we put into reality itself. What we understand and engage with reality is reality. It is the basic understanding that we get with Hegel. And that's like the essence of dialectics right there. With episode 2, the next solution is trying to save someone with gummy goo, because maybe we can just cling to someone else in this circus. So that, has a liberatory element to it, but it's obviously not enough. So we got to keep moving. Episode 3 is the one that really gives us therapy directly with Zubul getting therapy with Caine while the horror episode is happening. That's supposed to be for her, but we have the couch session with Caine. That couch session is shown, even though it gives us Zubul's motivation, it's really about Caine. So we're shown how you can't use therapy in this situation and be happy. It's still about Caine. It's all too much about Caine. We need more distance there. But what that stages is the ability to get us to Pomni and Keener. And Keener becomes who he really is, basically, and not just this adult-minded person. So we are getting a dialectic digging through of what's actually happening in this world. We get some first genuine, real understanding of what's going on in the digital circus itself. We understand our own position, and we get relief. Pomni gets some relief and is no longer someone who's just going, what's going on, after episode 3. In episode 4, we get to the suggestion box and this idea of, well, if you don't like my stories, let's see what your stories are. And we get to the position of Google with her fantasy. I want to get back to it, but it's liberatory, but it's not a full way out. And what that opens up in episode 5 is the myriad of, okay, everyone's suggestions, and it's this play of different scenarios, but where we're getting to is the tension between Jax and Ragatha and their conflicting ways of trying to save Pomni from abstraction, give her a way in which she can be content in this world in which you can't be content, in which you can't be a person, a subject. And we get the conflict of just lock into it, be violent, be mean, or let's be nice and deny what's going on about us. It's this constant, I can't actually accept what's going on in the reality around me, but I can be friendly. And we get how both of those positions don't work. Episode 6 just gives up and just says, hey, here's a bunch of pew-pew, go have fun, it's a video game. And we lean into that, we lean into Jax's position with Pomni as they go on a rampage for fun, trying to just be okay with their situation, and it gets to the antagonism between the two of them, and how Jax, with all of his leaning into it, still is unable to be who he is, and everyone else around him is going to abstract. So it's this existential crisis. So by getting to this point, we can actually relax and stop going so crazy. We have a beach episode, and that relaxing just gets us to the actual quest of really getting out. And the only one who's able to see through that is Jax, the character who, again, clings too tight to what's going on, who would read between the lines there. And it's with episode 8 that we get to the real underlying antagonism, like this antimony between Caine and the real people who are stuck in his world, where Caine just starts torturing people, and we get how that's a complete false start too, how it's not fun for anyone, but reaching that crisis gets us to actually wrestling with Caine himself and trying to fix Caine, but fixing Caine leads to where it leads. So it's a breaking open of the whole thing. And so you see how each step is a way of drilling into our own position and not just running away from Caine, because it's impossible. But what I think is the best here is that Gangle episode in episode 4, where we literally short circuit the desire that's put on us by Caine, this need to play these video games infinitely, and we instead play a game of working a boring fast food job, what we used to do in real life. And so that's work setting us free. We ditch the manic mask that she dons on to get everyone to be inspired to work a boring fast food job, and if you don't do it, I'll punish you. So super ego. But we ditch the mask at the end when we just get a moment of kindness out of Pomni, who lets her take a break early, or lets her leave early. And that leads to a really interesting transformation where Gangle, her unhappy base face smiles, and she charges into the world at night. Music starts playing, the visuals shift, And that does lead to the sudden traumatic being hit by a truck, finding yourself in the office of Caine's where you're being judged. So again, we're at this therapeutic relation between Caine and us. So what's liberatory there isn't finding both sides of life, happy and sad together, and accepting that. It's a way of getting distance from ourselves. So it's not just a distance from Caine. It's a distance from the way in which we can't have a footing in this world of Caine's. So Gangel gains that through work, through losing yourself in work. So it's this digging through our own position that we see throughout every episode that gets us to this point where we can actually dig through Caine's position too, and what that does. So this is what makes fiction work as philosophy, how we cling to our fantasy, and that changes our own position towards what we find traumatic. So it doesn't erase trauma. There's always going to be traumatic things out there in the world. There's always antagonistic things to come across. But it does change our relation towards certain antagonisms. So the antagonism of being locked in Caine's world is something you dig through dialectically. You dig through by clinging to your own position and seeing where it takes you. Now, this is the privileged territory of fiction. This is why fiction is not about putting buffers between us and what's traumatic, but actually getting us to see things through our characters. That's where fiction shines and has broadly speaking, a therapeutic quality to it. So this is the territory of psychoanalysis and what the analysis actually does, and also Hegelian dialectics. These are complicated things. I will talk about them specifically if you ask for it. But in analysis, the talking cure, we are airing out our fantasies to a person who's listening but not looking at us. And that basically gives us a way of approaching our own position until we change our relation towards our fantasies, the way in which we're skewed to the world. In dialectics, we are, again, seeing how we're involved in what we're experiencing, basically, what we see as reality. So it's not an out there thing. We're involved. Fiction involves us in the traumatic problem. So why does our world shatter and fall apart? That's a way of getting to our own position on things. And when we do that, we change within our own skin, even though outside reality is completely the same. So this is what I deal with here on the channel. This is why I write fiction as philosophy. This is the core thing at work here.